fastest growing part of America are independents and people who are rejecting the party. So you got to figure out that sweet spot of being in the game without, letting the game dictate who you are. So let's take an example of how the game is bad and then somebody who is checking the game. First example is the debt ceiling. I think it's nonsense. You were in there. You got to pay last time's bills. You shouldn't hold it hostage, overspending going forward. It's always done, more by your party than the other party, but always done. What do you make of this deal that's now on the table?
Well, I don't know about the changes that have been made in the Senate since it got passed over to the Senate. But the fact that majority of Democrats in the House and majority of Republicans in the House were able to pass something. Yes, there are some that were upset with what was in it or wasn't in it. But we can't default on our debt, plain and simple. The ramifications of doing that are significant. And so we need the Senate to move on this. But we also, once we get through this dilemma, we need to start thinking about how do we reduce the size and scope of the federal government? How do we make sure that we deal with the $1.7 trillion deficit in spending year to year and start addressing that $32 trillion that we're putting? It's an anchor that we're putting around our kids and our grandkids' necks. When you actually fund the government, you should make sure nobody talks about how much taxes had come in the last year and only provide services up to that point. One thing I think we need to be doing is I would be supportive of going to a 4-year appropriation cycle where you fund the government for 4 years. You can still do, review what's going on. Appropriations committees would still have a role. They probably wouldn't go for 4, maybe would go for 2. But if you do something like that, you get rid of this phenomenon that everybody knows happens in the government. If you don't use it, you lose it, right? Everybody knows that saying. And if you remove that away, you can start spending a little bit better. We also need to be introducing technology into the government, to have a government that is providing services to the American people in an efficient way. So I'm getting in the weeds a little bit here, Chris, but that's what I like to do.
No, that's all right.
Because we have real problems that need to be
and you need to be a
solved.
mechanic of the system. Got to be a mechanic of the system. Too many people are just in there saying hyperbolic things and trying to provoke all the time, and that's why we don't get any change. There's more political leverage in opposition than in taking a position and making it happen. Will is just referring to the part that when Congress puts, just so people understand, Will, when Congress apportions money to something and then it gets through the White House, if it's not used in the budgetary cycle it's appointed for, the money's gone. So it creates this exigency for them to spend the money even if they don't have a good way to spend it. Would you be in favor of a bill that says you negotiate all you want, but not holding hostage the debt ceiling, because all you do is put our credit rating at risk?
Look, absolutely. I think most people would agree with that. I think most people would vote for a balanced budget amendment. I think that came up a number of times when I was in Congress, and I was always for it. And so this is the ramifications. And here's what I always tell people. There are many folks in Congress, unfortunately from my party, that would like to see the government default, which is insane. The impact that would have immediately to veterans, to folks on Social Security, but also to people's 401ks would be disastrous, and it would have a long-term trend. And one of the things that we're also seeing, a lot of people are talking about de-dollarization, right? This is other countries doing currency exchanges not in dollar-denominated accounts. Why does this matter? Everybody's getting frustrated with the United States, and that ultimately hurts us, and that hurts our economy. And so when we have this kind of circus, every couple of years dealing with the debt ceiling, it has longer-term ramifications on our